Building a startup is a bit of a pain, as many of you guys know. I'm sure you're here, you're founders, or you're aspiring founders. You've done it before, or maybe looking to break into the space or understand a little bit better. Well, startups have major problems. They hit walls, obstacles all the time. I like to say entrepreneurship's it's a bit of an effing roller coaster of incredible highs and terrible lows. So today we're going to take you through some of those early highs, those early lows, from mastering the pitch, raising funding, growth, scaling, and traction. Before we do, all of this is brought to you guys by Forward.Earth, our global community to connect folks in all sides of sustainability, climate, environment, as well as our consulting arm, which helps startups and scale-ups with things like fundraising, growth. Wow, I'm freezing a little bit on my my hiring, partnerships, grants, etc. If you need help taking your company further faster, that's what we're here for. Mehak is our CMO and Chief Marketing Officer here at Forward, as well as quite a few other things. I'll let her introduce herself, and I'll hand things over to you, Mehak, because I've been talking a little bit too much, and then I'll give you guys a quick intro on me, my background, and a little bit more about our consulting arm.
Thanks for that, Matt. First up, yes, we're happy to join you here. We see a lot of good mornings coming in, so we appreciate those who've come in from the East and the West Coast today. It is super early, especially for those joining us from the West Coast, so we appreciate your time. And I hope you've got a nice cup of coffee ready along with this session. I'm going to do a short intro, Matt, of yourself and me, and then, of course, if I miss any pieces, feel free to complete it. But just why are we here, and what authority do we have to be here to talk about startups hitting a wall? Well, Matt's a serial entrepreneur. We call him a startup pro. And of course, he's been a pro at connecting climate and sustainability catalysts globally. So whether it's fundraising, it's concept validation, he's your go-to person for both North America and for Europe. And that's because Matt's originally from the US, and he's now, of course, living in the beautiful, picturesque Swiss city of Zurich. Matt's built this Forward community from zero to where it is today, both globally and locally. So if you want to have a couple of conversations around how do you build groups of trust, how do you amplify word of mouth, then he's the right person to go to, because he's done this single-handedly for the initial period. All good there, Matt?
Definitely good there. You're certainly better at the professional kind of introduction side of things. It's always hard trying to take things through the tech and the tech issues. And luckily, we've got awesome people alongside us here at Forward, like Mehak. Mehak, you're going to have to walk through your adventure as Chief Marketing Officer working with F1, major clean tech companies, and how you've helped it with growing and scaling. And then we can take this next level now that we really are starting to get folks on board. We can help them move their projects forward faster with a little bit of funding and growth.
Matt, I'm only going to stick to the ones that are good for the climate. So we will skip the others, including F1 from the introduction. But guys, in a nutshell, I'm Mehak. I've done 15 years of marketing and growth. The past 6 have been driving business outcomes for hardware and software, climate and sustainability startups, as well as scale-up. So CCUS, DAC, e-mobility, the usual compliance software, SaaS. I've done all of this living in the Netherlands over the past few years. So that's me in a nutshell. The reason we put together this session was because we received a bunch of questions and some fantastic feedback on the challenges and roadblocks being experienced by startups. We're also, to add to Matt's point, professionally helping a select bunch of companies via our consultancy services. But what we've done for today is to batch up some of the commonly asked questions and put it into a presentation. Of course, we are not addressing everything that you could have as a challenge. So if you wish to dive deeper into a topic or ask us a question outside of this, feel free to drop in your questions into the chat. I'll pick them up during if they're connected to the topic or at the end, and we'll make sure we have enough time at the end.
And we'll share the recordings of this, the presentation, as well as all of the links to basically anything that you might need, as well as more info about that consulting arm, because like the questions for this event, a lot of people reach out and need some help, and we're here to help, and certainly have the team and the expertise for that. But to do that, we're here mostly to help you guys. So let's get to the content. It's not really about us. It's about taking your visions forward. So let's do that. So we're here today, and first things first. So if you're a startup, you're looking to grow and scale, two biggest challenges: you need money, because otherwise you're dead. So it's either fundraising or customers. And how do you do that as quickly as possible? To dive into the how do you fund your company? How do you get the product and project going? How do you take that project to the next level and start to go to market so you can get customers, clients, and really start getting the traction you need to either become sustainable, profitable, or land larger investment rounds if that's the route you're going. We'll break that down a little bit later. The growth strategies that are kind of needed and ideal at different stages of your company, how you grow profitably, which has become incredibly important these days with the slowdown in VC plus Mr. Trump's fight against climate, some action plans and next steps for you and your company so you can take this and actually move forward with it. Where do you need to go and how do you get there? And then some Q&A. So you've got questions for us on fundraising, on growth, on designing business models, landing partnerships. We are here to help you guys. That is the entire point of this presentation. And first things first, so funding. That's generally what a lot of companies come to us for, with help for essentially, I need to meet investors. I need to make my pitch deck better. I've never done this before. How do I do this? So before we even get into pitching investors, making pitch decks, I think it's important as well to bring up that there's two different types of businesses. There are the more bootstrapped or self-funded businesses where you have a product, a vision, it's something you can build, you do it in your time, and you put your effort into that. It maybe takes 5, 10, 100K kind of your effort to get this off the ground. Ideally, less is better, and you can scale that up from there. But these type of businesses, they're typically not the ones that can be the 5, 10, $100 billion type outcomes. Forward, for instance, we're a bootstrapped company. We're not funded because we're not going for growth at all costs, which is what most investors want to see, is those billion-dollar possible outcomes. They're looking for, is this something that can return my fund 5, 10, 100 times over? Because they assume most startups will fail. That's the economics of VC. Happy to break that down a bit deeper for folks if you want to ever set up a session or get a little bit more support with this. But really what they want to see is this working in terms of the tech, be that hardware or software, and is the market actually interested in this? Are they willing to pay? There's really 3, maybe 4 T's that we call the keys to raising funding. So in no particular order, it's the technology, it's the timing, it's the team, and the traction. Technology, clear enough. Does it solve a major problem? Is this helping with pollution, biodiversity, energy generation, etc.? And is there some type of protection or IP or defensibility around what you're building so it's not going to get knocked off immediately by China, Tesla, whoever it may be? Market timing, why now versus 2 or 3 years ago? Because if someone could have done this 2 or 3 years ago, why haven't they? And why is it going to happen now? And this is kind of the a rising tide lifts all boats. If this is something that is really riding on a movement and a moment, now is the perfect time. The team, which I'd argue is the most important, are you absolute badasses? Why are you guys going to be the ones that make this happen? Do you have the track record? Have you raised funding, built companies before? Were you one of the first growth people at XYZ? Do you have the technical chops and expertise that no one else in the world has? What makes you world-class? Because startups, it comes 100% down to the team. In the end, it's going to be miserable. It's going to be hard. Are you the ones that have the grit, the fortitude, and the luck to make it happen? And then, of course, traction. How is things landing with customers? Are you getting clients? Have you gotten that first kind of product market fit or proof points where customers are clearly valuing and paying for what you do? If that's the case, you can be good to go. If not, investors might be a little hesitant. Some big red flags investors look for: overpromising, either on how big it can be or how fast it can go; ignoring the competition. Either if you claim that the competition doesn't exist, i.e. you don't know that they're there, or that they are completely irrelevant, it shows a bit of lacking on the part of the founders. You need to have good answers to whatever the investors ask you. For instance, with Reed Hastings and Netflix, you know his biggest competition at the time? Sleep, 8 hours a day. But that's kind of how you have to be thinking as a founder. What is the thing, or what is the alternative to your product that solves the problem for companies, and is that pain point big enough? Mehak will talk a little bit more about that later. And then last but not least, bad unit economics. Does anyone remember Blue Apron or all of those home delivery companies? Well, they were incredible and they were super popular and they were like the scooter companies and all of these things that were rush to the moon, until they realized they didn't actually make money very well. Because you could get the early customers, but then you had to spend increasingly more money to get the worse and worse customers who would ultimately churn. Hence why those companies never became or really led to massive outcomes, other than early investors who managed to pass the bag to someone else. Green flags, what investors are looking for: pilots and partnerships. Do you have clients? Do you have strategies or ways for distribution that are proprietary that other people can't or don't have? And why are you going to be the ones to make it happen here? Regulatory tailwinds. These are a nice to have, but they can't be an only. For instance, carbon taxes, credits, etc. We don't like companies that rely purely on regulation, because if regulations change, or if presidents come in and try to ruin the climate agenda initiative and say anti-science type things, that can make things more challenging. So you got to have a path to profitability without relying purely on regulation. And those are the big things that investors are looking for. And remember, big outcomes above all else.
Matt, I'm going to stop you there because you've spoken to a ton of VCs. And tell me, when they are going through decks or listening to pitches, what are the secret one or two signals that tell them this company might actually survive the build, or they might survive the grind, or this is the company that's possibly going to survive the first 3 years of go-to-market?
I think first and foremost, team. So is this team world-class? There's basically winners and everyone else, especially when it comes to venture. 1 or 2 companies out of the 30 to 50 companies that a VC invests in their fund, that's going to be the one that returns the fund multiple times over. And it's such a power law in terms of the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Facebooks. You have to hit those absolute winners, and those winners are the ones where things are working, and you also have the team that will make it happen no matter what. The other thing that I think that is really important for investors is the defensibility. They don't want to see something that is going to be built and then replicated. For instance, no offense to anyone here, but there's a lot of biochar companies, and there's not a huge whole lot of differentiation or defensibility between them. So you need to know, are you selling an iPhone, or are you selling an Android? Are you selling something where people pay a premium and they value what it is that what you're offering? So you save them significant amounts of money, you make them look good in a certain way, you appeal to their kind of personal morals or view of the world? Or are you something where you're kind of toilet paper? You get the job done for them, but the brand doesn't really matter, and it's a race to the bottom price-wise.
We've said sticks and carrots in the past, but Matt, the first time I've heard whether you're toilet paper or something else.
Well, yeah, sticks and carrots is kind of what gets customers to buy, but it's really, so at least for myself and for most people that I know, you have 2 different buckets of things that you buy. There are the things you're truly passionate about. They're your hobbies, be that food or sports, skiing, traveling, clothes, and those types of things. Those are the kind of luxuries where you're willing to spend more or a lot more to get the best, because it really matters to you. But for instance, the things that aren't as important to some of us, for instance, furniture, the brand of carrots that you buy, the type of socks that you wear, etc. You want the cheapest, easiest solution. You want the Amazon basics, as long as it's good enough.
Coming back to map, what else can startups do if they don't want to go the VC route?
You don't want to go the VC route. There are some other models. So we talked about staying profitable and focusing on sustainable growth. Basically, you make more money, you spend more money, you grow your team, you advance your product. Beyond traditional VC, there's obviously grants. A lot of you may be here for grants as well. Grants are very challenging, but can be huge payoffs in terms of non-dilutive funding from the government or from foundations or industry to help you build and grow, especially climate tech solutions. These are less prevalent with SaaS type or software solutions, but in hardware and deep tech, these can be great, especially in Europe where there is so much horizon funding and other types of climate and sustainability focused grants. Beyond those, there are partnerships, there's revenue-based financing. So you're selling a product and then you can get kind of debt or loans against the revenues of that company so that you can have the money you need for inventory, et cetera. This is more typical in a physical products or commodities type business. With grants, we at Forward can certainly help there. We've got a bunch of different grant consultants in our consulting collective that can help you with finding, identifying, applying for, and really positioning yourself to win grants, which can absolutely fund you through kind of the earliest stages. And then maybe you don't need VC anymore because there is so much grant funding available for you. But it really depends on the stage at which you're at. There's partnerships with corporates or even selling kind of pilots or products to corporates in a developmental type way. We'll build this out for you. It's a $100K a year deal for this technology to be implemented on your, let's call it brewery or your smokestacks that's going to capture the carbon here, here, and here, but you need to pre-buy it ahead of time to pay for developmental costs, and therefore kind of will give it to you at cost. And then there's blended approaches, so combining some type of dilutive and non-dilutive funding. So grants or debt or money from the bank in terms of low rate interest loans combined with investors. And investors, there's the VC model that we talked about, which is really the go big or go home, as well as angels, syndicates, and smaller investment groups, as well as everyone's favorite, friends, family, and fools. So the early people that really believe and support in you and cut you the 5K check here, the 10K check there to help get your dream off the ground while you are building what you do. And those would be some of the different kind of models that you can use to make your company sustainable, scalable, because biggest challenge with a company, your company exists until you run out of money. So how do you fund it? That's part one. Part two, equally important and incredibly important for getting that funding, is how do you get customers? So what's that game we need to play, Mehak?
Matt, when I ask founders, are you ready to go to market? Sometimes they tell me, oh, but we're already in the market. So let me be clear, being in the market is not the same as having a go-to-market strategy. Being in the market means you have a website or you have a product that's ready. Maybe you have a pitch deck, maybe a pilot. But a go-to-market strategy means that you've made some very deliberate decisions. You know who you're selling to, why they'll say yes, what motion will get you from the first hello to that revenue, and how to leverage those initial logos. Because remember, you're not building a Pinterest board. You have those logos for credibility and relatability. And also, how are you going to use all of this to build a growth engine? And of course, while you're doing that, as fantastic startup founders, you're looking at funding, you're looking at managing finances, ops, product, etc. So super important when you build out a go-to market to be very deliberate and very selective about what you end up doing. That brings me to what I call 3 M's of GTM readiness, which is mindset. So yes, mentally, are you there? Have you answered all your questions? Are you making very intentional steps? Motion. So do you have do you have the know-how to know how to move and get those initial customers? And momentum, is that process then getting you the momentum that you need to be able to take the brand to where it is? There's
Would
something called challenger versus
you call momentum product market fit?
I call momentum the point where growth starts to feel lighter. So whether you're experimenting across segments and sectors, but that's where the market seems to be moving to you with you. A lot of what you initially hypothesized as the pain point is now what the market is also speaking. So you're not adjusting your message to the market seems to be speaking your language. And that can happen at various points for various companies. But really, that when the whole effort begins to get lighter, and I know quite a few scale-up founders will say it doesn't get lighter at all, but there is a moment when the metrics begin to indicate that things are in your favor. I do want to go right to the top, Matt, and make this point around challenger versus category creator, because it's really important to build the right mindset and the right timing. A challenger needs to articulate who they're replacing. A category creator needs to build a brand new category. If you are building a brand new category, then your go to market motion starts way before even the beta version of your product is ready. So if you wait to build the most beautiful product that you have, whether it's hardware or software, and then you will go and speak to the market when you're building out a new category, you've already lost a critical amount of time. So it's
How do
super
you
important.
know which you are and which you should be?
So let me give you the example of two clients that we're working with. One is building a product carbon footprint platform. So the main competitors are other softwares that are out there. They're also up against traditional tools like Excel. So there is a current way of solving that problem, and that means that you're now a challenger or a displacer. So the internal consultants, the legacy ways. If any of that exists, if that problem today can be solved, not effectively, not efficiently, but it can, then naturally you're a challenger in the category. You're going to try and displace some previous tools. So with the product carbon footprint, they're clearly a challenger, right? They need to show why their platform is faster. They need to show how they make things easier, and ultimately how do they deliver output for sustainability teams in a better way. So they need to say, here's what you're using today. Here's why it's costing you time, accuracy, credibility, and here's what we do better. That is a challenger messaging. Now, contrast this with another climate tech company I've worked with where we were building direct air capture for on site CO2 supply. So, this is something that most people had not heard of 3 years ago. Today's very mainstream narrative. So, the conversation in the market at that point was largely around carbon credits and CDR, and not about decentralizing carbon for reuse. This very clearly made us a category creator. We were not fighting existing ways or existing competitors. We were trying to build a brand new mental category. So our job wasn't to prove how that can do it better. Our job was to prove that this is also possible. And that requires a ton of use cases, education, thought leadership, all of which takes time. So my question really for any startup here and for any startup that ends up listening to us is, are you replacing something, or are you helping people see a future they didn't know was possible? Because then that changes everything about how you go to market.
And I think it also changes what exactly you need to build. And in my opinion, to create a challenger, you need to be 5 to 10x better than the competition in some way. Because why are you going to have people take the switching cost of, well, I was on Netflix and now I'm going to switch to Amazon Video? There's that habit that's built in. You need to be a significant upgrade, not slightly better. Versus
And
category.
faster, Matt.
Yeah.
And faster, because if Netflix has got its stickiness, you're not going to move to Prime. So you've got to do it better and faster.
Better, faster, or incredibly cheaper. And incredibly cheaper is hard to scale because it's a race to the bottom. And then category creators, VCs and investors like to see this, but because they are more defensible if they hit, but they are also incredibly more challenging to do and to change consumer behavior. Imagine Steve Jobs with the iPhone. That's a true category creator.
Absolutely. And we often talk about need. And at that point, we had the first time when Apple really reigned over the market, BlackBerry was very well entrenched. There was no need to move. And yet Apple came in with a brand new product and went in and built out a completely new category, getting people to make that switch. The point I do want to make around motion and momentum very quickly is motion is what you build. And it's super important to build that at an early stage. And momentum is what the market gives you back. And you need both, because if you're only pushing and nothing's pulling, you're not ready to scale just yet. So it's really important to, again, think through all of this, ensure you have enough build time, because you are not just the go-to-market person, you're also a CFO, COO, CPO, and chief coffee bringer as well. So it's really important to build in the right amount of time and to be very intentional with the actions that you take place when you go to market.
And to not wait too long as well, because if you're not at least a bit embarrassed about the product that you start to push and go to market, you've probably waited too long.
Yeah, and as we speak about challenger versus category creator, maybe it's worth jumping to the next slide, where I think we've got a couple of points that you and I constantly talk about and encourage startups to think about, right? First up, pill versus vitamin. So how bad is that pain that is being felt by your customer? A pill means they need the solution now, and a vitamin is a good to have, which sometimes you forget to have.
And one is the one you're willing to pay for no matter what, because you are on fire and it's a glass of water. And one is, of course, the one we forget. Then there's the sticks and the carrots approach. How do you motivate people to buy it? Ideally, you don't have to motivate people, because if you do, you have to change customer behavior, consumer behavior. Thoughts on this, Mehak?
Yeah, with the carrot, there's a large amount of work on changing behavior. But I think if you can, with the carrot, you're incentivized to make a business case. The concern that happens with sticks, Matt, is that a lot of companies come in to build solutions, and I would say a lot of them are software solutions, because there's a looming deadline for a regulation or a compliance piece. And the issue there is, because there's a deadline, you're not building a business case. You've not done the work on the ICP and the pain, because all you're seeing is that looming deadline. And we have a few coming in the EU, at least in 2025 and 2026. And so you jump the go-to-market motion, which means even if your product has business benefits, you've actually not gone through the process of building that out thoroughly. Agree or disagree on that, Matt?
I think I could agree. And I also, while sticks are helpful, the rules can also change. And if you're playing on someone else's playground, you always need to keep in mind you need that defensibility around your acquisition model and your USP beyond purely someone being told they have to do it. Now, the extra pain of that, for instance, we're working with a company now that handles carbon tariffs. The EU's brought in carbon tariffs, which means anything that was brought into the EU will now start to have to pay carbon taxes from where it was produced. And that is a major pain for importers to have to pay a ton of money. So this pain, this kind of stick, means that they can go for the carrot of saving money by then finding a solution and an offsetting way to offset those. So if you can really combine the carrot and the stick, then you can have your cake and eat it too a little bit.
Yeah. The regulatory tailwinds are always helpful, but don't forget to build the business case out. So don't jump over the go-to-market intentional strategy. It's super important to ensure you build that. The previous time we did a webinar, there were quite a few B2C climate startups in attendance. And I was asked a question around how do you build growth drivers within B2C? So I do want to take a few minutes here to walk you through some basic instincts, which are how you set up a B2C company. The first is around cost. So this is the easiest and laziest lever, I guess, but you build something because you're simply cheaper. But remember, the competition for the bottom can really get hot sometimes. The other one's around efficiency. So this works beautifully when you're replacing a behavior. So let's think of, let's say, refilling a bottle versus buying a new one. Let's think of project management tools. So if you can save people time, clicks, or even decision fatigue, you win. The third one, and the tough one, is around shame. This is the quiet growth driver nobody wants to admit they're using. I don't have a climate tech example for it per se, but I'm saying just think about diet apps. No one's bragging about using any. There's often shame in the usage, but there's an urgency in the problem. So you could build climate tools that fall into this, anything around carbon tracking apps, flight emission calculators, usage behavior for people. So if you're building and using shame, then own it responsibility. And the thing is, you've got to make feedback private. So I think that's the one around using the shame lever. And of course, the easiest one is delight. It's the best kind of B2C growth, where people actually want to talk about your product. Think Oatly, think Lovable. That's the fun bracket to be in. So if you're building a B2C climate product, ask yourself, what are you solving for? And which of these emotional triggers are you leaning on? Because then that has its own complete strategy.
And with each of those as well, why will you be the one who owns that? Oatly, good example. Also bad example, because it's real easy to make an oat-based or a plant-based milk. So it is, in a lot of senses, either a branding exercise or a race to the bottom. So it becomes challenging from a fundraising perspective, but that doesn't mean it can't be a great business.
Yeah, and coming back, Matt, to the point you made at the start around profitability, it's important that you do a branding exercise while the unit economics still makes sense. That's where possibly thought leadership comes into play very strongly. So if you are creating a category or trying to carve out a niche for yourself, think again about very intentional thought leadership. It saves you the pennies on branding. Matt, I think you're saying something there and you're on mute.
I apologize. Or allows you to have higher margins, because if people view you as the leader in the space, Apple's not that much better than Android, but people pay a heck of a lot more for it. And the same is true with any types of premium products. If you can have the premium positioning, you can also help people feel something more, get something more out of your product, whether it is real or perceived. Then you can also have that perceived increase in price and value.
True. So, what does all this go-to-market conversation mean in terms of actual build-out? And this, it'll be fantastic if you can screenshot it and implement it as well. It's a very practical tool. Don't answer what's our tech. Ask yourself whose hair is on fire. What again is the problem you're solving? You cannot spend too little time or too much time on trying to understand what is the problem you're solving. So problem focus and not tech and feature focus. That's step one. Step two, you need to understand what's the market opportunity and what's the ICP within it. For this, do three things. Try and understand what's your currently serviceable market, so your SOM. So, who is it that you can actually achieve? Because the 3 trillion TAM that you've put is not real. So, who's really your SOM? What exactly is their need? Who is feeling that need? Is there a job title, a personality type, or a work role? And in which countries is this need greater than others? That gives you your first bucket of an opportunity ICP. Step number two, try and build out your value proposition. Your value proposition is a sum total of what your solution is, what the product's capability is, and what your competitors are doing. And you have to, if you're in a challenger category, you have to have competitors. So ask yourself, is Asana solving this? Is Excel solving this? Is a shovel solving this problem at the moment? How really is somebody trying to solve this problem? Because all those tiny pieces are your competition. And only when you really understood the competition along with your solution and product is when you iron out what your value proposition is. And then I recommend building what I call a CAM matrix, which is a channel audience messaging matrix. You've understood your audience, that's the ICP. You've understood the messaging because that's your value proposition. Now you need to ask yourself, on which channels does my ICP consume information? And of those channels, which channels do they trust?
An
I have in
ICP,
mind
ideal customer persona for
ideal
people.
customer profile, exactly. So on this audience that I'm now speaking to, this customer that I want, that's my audience. And where am I going to speak to them? Do bear in mind that channels on which people consume information need not be the channels from which they make business decisions. So an oil and gas C-suite sitting on LinkedIn is scrolling through LinkedIn, but he or she is not asking, okay, where am I going to buy my next solution from via LinkedIn? They're using a different network. So you've got to build out channels of information consumption, but more importantly, channels of trust. And that is your first marketing tactic. Your marketing tactic is not LinkedIn because it's happening or your network because it's easy. It's this channel piece that you can solve that becomes your marketing tactic. And I think the other point is, who are you really looking for in terms of company profile? Is it an early adopter or are you looking for an enterprise client? And there's a massive difference in how you would approach those two. So early adopters move fast. They're looking for edge. They're slightly small to mid-sized companies, and they're happy to work with an unfinished product simply because they care about the upside of that polish. An enterprise pilot, which is a large organization, is slow. They need much larger buy-in. They need security reviews, documentation, alignment with internal processes. So even if they love your mission and your product, there is a process, and that process requires time and effort from your end as well. So if you expect enterprise clients to behave like early adopters simply because they're early adopters, they won't. You'll either be too scrappy or too formal, and you will stall.
And you'll also, especially with enterprise sales, it's important to keep in mind that given the time frames, yes, they can be massively lucrative, but it's not going to be fast money. So you will probably need some other type of transition financing or smaller customers that allow you to reach into and have the runway to attract those big fish, so to speak. Otherwise, you'll starve trying to catch your whale.
Yeah, well said there. You need the early adopters while you try and win the large enterprise pilots or enterprise clients. And then the last piece really around the go-to-market practical plan is localization. Is this in your home country, which means you have a certain home advantage, you're sitting there, you know how they speak, what they speak, or are you launching in a foreign country? Because localization is not just about translating your website and your presentation decks or your sales documents. It's really about understanding what's the cultural nuance of a certain country and what is the context. So again, get that piece organized on how much of localization is required in your go-to-market strategy.
And again, if you need help with any of this, we have folks on our team like Mehak who can help with building out that CAM matrix, the CAM matrix, and then setting your company up for growth and success. We've got a lot of strategies to do that as well. I think you wanted to walk through these.
I won't go one by one on them, but I think it's important to maybe to share that sometimes founders end up picking what I call very sexy motions. So the one that sounds good or the one that is trending. And it's super important to ask yourself, what's the one that actually fits the product and also the buyer friction. As a startup, I normally recommend that you pick one of these growth strategies. You only have the staff and the mindset and the mind space to implement one. And as you start going beyond the 1 million annual revenue, then you probably begin to add one more. So that's normally my recommendation. Matt, if I can take a few minutes here, I want to give an example of a client that we worked with who was doing smart thermal insulation panels for commercial buildings. So there was a lot of green flags there on recycled materials, embedded sensors, data calculation, etc. Because they're at the end of the day delivering energy cost reduction, improved ESG reporting, etc. We discussed a couple of motions on how to go about growth. The first one was let's be product led. It's hardware with data, it's very sexy, but the fact is there is no self-serve onboarding. So that's too much friction, and that was removed. We then said what's most typical, let's go sales led. Let's get sales teams, let's get them to send out 500 emails because almost any and every building would require this. And let's try and see what we can build out there. And there we faced that challenge that an enterprise pilot, and a pilot alone was a 12-month sales cycle. And again, the sales team was struggling simply because there was no credibility built into the system. So that one was removed. The moment we said credibility, we said, let's do a marketing-led motion. Let's do, PRs on PR releases. Let's do a nice webinar, etc., etc. The problem again, fantastic awareness, but it wasn't converting. We'd now solved top of the funnel and we didn't have a piece for bottom of the funnel. Eventually, what we did with the organization was to do a partner-led growth motion. So they partnered with ESG consultants, energy auditors, and contractors. So people who are already embedded into the building system, educated these partners and then made them sell into the building solutions. So this helped shorten the sales cycle by 40%, get the first nice 5-6 shiny logos. And then as we clocked in the first million, it moved to a sales plus marketing-led growth motion.
How do you know where to start, and how do you eliminate models or think through prioritization to minimize the amount of time that it takes to find what works?
I think it goes back to the go-to-market strategy and the channel audience messaging matrix. Where is that audience consuming its information from to make business decisions? And can you reach those channels directly, or do you need support? If you can reach those channels directly, there is room to do marketing, sales, But if you do need support, you're then looking at either a partner-led growth motion or even a community-led growth motion. So it depends. I don't think any startup should get into a PLG because there are just too many software pieces to fix around it. And so that's a much more mature model. So really ask yourself, who's my audience and where am I going to be able to communicate to them in a trust-based environment? That very simple answer is going to tell you how your growth strategy is going to pan out.
And where can you be world-class and stand out from others? I would add that.
True.
Next slide.
Let's carry on. And this one I'm going to ask you, Matt, because we end up getting a lot of companies asking us, how do we stay mission-centered? How do we deploy all these strategies that we have while we achieve market viability? What's your nugget of advice that you end up giving them?
So I've had a lot of talks, and we'll call them friendly disagreements with VCs and other folks, that they only invest in companies that mitigate so many gigatons of carbon or that hit XYZ specific milestones and metrics. And my argument is that's stupid, because our goal is to move the world forward, be that reducing pollution, be that less waste in the water, be that protecting our soil and biodiversity. And I think that this can be kind of built into this question as well of how do we think about profitability? And it's the reason why we named this and we made things Forward for Forward. We help climate and sustainability doers move the world forward. So for every new client, every new customer, every new job, investor, etc., what they're doing is positive and productive movement for the world towards a better place. And that's how I think you need to think about your business models as well, is how can you profitably drive positive impact on the world? Because if you can do that, as you grow and scale, your profit scales accordingly, and so does your impact. So think about not how do you make necessarily the perfect product or what is the absolute ideal. If we used vegan leather here instead of lab grown leather or whatever, then sure, it would be more expensive, but it would be better for etc. Sometimes you have to compromise on things a bit to drive impact. Another perfect example with this, because quickly, most of Germany's mistakes have been being idealistic instead of realistic. And I think with startups, you need to be realistic. How are you going to make money? How will you continue to make money? And if you don't, you are letting the world down. Building that into your business early on, and then looking at not people doing always the right thing and choosing your product in a higher price point, we will have solved the kind of meat consumption crisis, not by having better, tastier plant-based meats, but by when we have replacements and lab-grown meats that taste, same health, same everything, but literally are just less expensive than butchering an animal. Because people love the taste of food or of meat, we can't assume everyone is going to be Buddha. I certainly have all of my own personal flaws. You have to make your product positive impact on the world and default the better, easier, cheaper option for people while still optimizing on having profit. So how do you think about that? How do you build that into your models and margins? And how do you think about scaling so that you can make massive impact? And even if it's not 100% perfect, it's 99% good enough.
Yeah, and well connected to that, Matt, I think is the next point around key metrics. So don't get into the game of building out complex sheet with complex metrics. As you stay focused on your mission, simply ask yourself, what's the metric or metrics that help you earn your next customer and that next customer's trust? And that's probably the only one to focus on.
I would definitely agree with that. And if your cost of acquisition goes up or down over time, also incredibly important. So for things like networks, like Forward, well, we have no cost of acquisition because we don't have a business model charging folks. It's a community. Everything here is free. Speaking of, if you would share this with a friend or fellow climate colleague. It helps us grow and keep this free for you. But think about, how are you acquiring customers? Is it spending more and more on advertising, or are you able to build awesomeness into your product, your service, etc., so you have word of mouth, network effects, etc.?
True. And if you start getting into paid advertising and paid purchases, then your CAC really doesn't decline, because you've got a formula that worked in market 1, and as you go to market 3, or if you build use case 2, you're going to implement exactly the same formula, and CAC will keep growing rather than declining. So I think it's really important to identify what are your viral networks of growth, and then to keep an eye on those 1 or 2 metrics that really indicate the health of the business and mission viability, as we call it.
And what's the 80-20? How can you put in the lowest effort, cost, etc., and get the maximum impact? And that's where we, and especially Mehak, can help there, if this is of interest for anybody. Brick wall to breakthrough. There's lots of brick walls. There's lots of obstacles. I could read you my email list or my emails, and every day there would be plenty of ones coming up. It's fundraising. It's how do you pay your team? It's how do you build out a strategy for attracting investors? How do you actually get the follow-on rounds that you need to scale the company? It's on the growth side of things, prioritizing. How do you go to market? Where do you go to market? Designing the messaging. Your messaging isn't hitting right. You need to do a major overhaul of the branding. We just did one of those with Forward. If you haven't seen our What is Forward video, trying to explain a little bit better what we do. Mehak can talk targeting companies and growth strategy, but having all of these things lined up so that you're not constantly running into a wall every time you're looking to grow is key to your success. What would you say are the biggest challenges that companies, that startups face? Obviously, there's co-founder issues, there's fundraising, there's customers. What are the big challenges or trends that you see?
I'm going to toss that question to 34 of our members. Tell us some of your challenges. Tell us where you find roadblocks. Tell us conversations you're part of. Ask us, and let's try and build this out together.
That is a great point. We're here. We're a community. We're all here for one another to help advance your startup, your mission, your initiative, your climate careers and goals. How can we help you overcome your biggest obstacles in your business, in your growth, in your partnerships, expansion, clients, etc.? Share those now in the chat so that we can try to tailor a little bit of the last parts of this presentation, which is mostly about your questions, your comments. So what are you struggling with? What do you need help with? Anybody have any questions they want to throw into the live chat or into the Q&A?
Ramesh, Ramesh, I see your point around hardware is hard. And I couldn't agree more. While I've referenced a little bit of software at the point you were listening in, but the fact is, I've been with hardware companies in climate for the last 6 years, and it's brutal. There's the challenge of building and scaling that hardware, but alongside really is how do you go from prototype to pilot to commercial scale. There's no easy answer. A couple of things that I've done out of experience is one, you're not building a product. When you communicate to the market, you're building trust. So no one's going to buy a prototype, especially in this risk-averse market. You've got to be selling with confidence. What's useful there is to really talk about use cases, very specifically how you integrate into a use case. Look at things like third-party validations, LCAs, work with credible engineering partners, and see how you can deliver visible proof, even if it's installing a unit at a pilot, having some imagery, some promotion around it. So that's a very important piece that we've been working on. And talk about it in narrative, but also talk about it in numbers. Your first sales team is your deployment team. So really, they need to be able to deliver pilots very well, but they also need to be physically present and run that motion. So we have sales teams who don't hand it over the moment a customer is closed won in our CRM, but they're actually hand-holding through that entire deployment process, even physically being present, whether it's a prototype, a pilot, or an actual paying customer. So we've trained our teams in a sense that they understand technically what they're selling, and they're able to to manage the client's expectations and the product's very limited capabilities. And the other thing is you can't scale without services. So you really need to preempt integration blockers. You need to put in SLAs. You need to find the right kind of teams who can then deliver service, because this is not your regular HVAC being fixed, but this is a climate tech piece that is being sorted. So yes, it's extremely hard. And yeah, and this is like a very simple, very simplistically put way of going, but I've done it for the last 6 years, and I promise you it started to turn some of my hair white as well.
But you can also use some of those services as well for opportunities for additional revenue, either having service contracts or renting out equipment on a monthly basis to the customer. So to rewind a little bit on how do you solve that chicken and egg problem of getting the funding you need to build the product and get from TRL 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to the 7, 8, 9s. So there are some other options you can do as well, like partnering with local universities and getting research or technical support there, so you can get products working in the lab or working and applying for grants and funding so that you can get either with local municipalities or governments the funding and resources you need to spin up a water sanitation system in Southeast Asia, or et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there's early stage angel investors. Typically, the best type for these early type hardware products will be people who are working in or around the industry, who've got some expertise but a little bit more cash and are interested in what you're doing. If they're considering or offering to be an advisor and introduce you to customers, clients, etc., say yes, that would be awesome. But first, we'd love to get to know each other with a bit of dating. If you want to put a little bit of funding into our company and what we're doing and show how you can really buy into the vision and add value, then we'd love to discuss advisor shares, etc., in the future. All of these can be different ways that you can get the funding and resources you need to kickstart your product, so to speak, which can also be one crowdfunding, although it's not often the best model for hardware companies because it's much harder to build. It's much more expensive, takes more time. And often you end up with nothing or less than nothing in terms of money that the company has.
Matt, there are some more questions coming in here around finding co-founders. So we have a couple of startup founders here who are trying to find technical and non-technical co-founders and figuring how to really go about it. Do they get revenue and find the co-founder, but then you need the co-founder to show the VCs you have the right team. So what's the best approach on it?
Network your face off. We've got our co-founder jobs and dating section where you can post who you are, what you're looking for, as well as look at other job posts or openings. Certainly the local events can be a good way to network with folks. We're in a remote world now, so I would get into those industry forums that we have as well. So if you're interested in transportation and energy or water and blue economy and building a company in those spaces, share what you're doing, what you're looking for, and try to find collaborators there. This is a major mistake so many founders have. No one's interested in stealing your idea. Your idea is awesome, sure, but it's all about execution, and no one wants to do a bajillion things that it takes to bring a startup from misery into existence. So share what you're doing with others, folks in your network, LinkedIn, Forward, etc. So that ask, do you know someone I should talk to? Is there someone who might be interested in this? Or finding people who can work with you. By sharing what you're doing, more people are more likely to help you move your vision forward. No one's going to steal it. It's really not that easy to do. And that can be kind of some of the best advice that I would have for finding co-founders. So lots and lots of networking, sharing what you're doing, and leveraging sites like ours and other platforms for finding folks.
I think there's a final question about how do you identify who your early adopters are? How do you know who to choose or prioritize? I think somewhere that happens in that process of really refining your ICP. If you speak to a lot of people and the problem resonates with them, what you're trying to solve, then that is really your bucket of early adopters. My only advice there, early adopters are young companies or mid-sized companies. So if you feel an enterprise is an early adopter, while I wouldn't say that's impossible, but you're potentially in a longer sales cycle. So I wouldn't put them in that category. But really, your process of validation and understanding the problem and the need is where your early adopters will start coming from. So do a little bit more of that, and you'll begin to see a pattern of certain kinds of job titles or companies who feel that pain more than the others.
And for B2C, it's on the individual side of things. You need to think about who are the weirdos that want to try this stuff out because it'll make them look cool to their friends and network. Because that's usually what it comes down to a little bit with the early adopters. Ideally, you're one of those weirdos just like us, and you're building a solution that you personally need for your problem with sustainable skiing or getting to travel or whatever it happens to be. And if it is, you can find other folks like you, but don't only rely on people like you, because if you do, you'll build a team that's a bit too homogenous, so to speak. So really try to get out there and see who else could be the potential early adopters.
Super. Thanks for all those questions coming in. And if you have any additional ones, we're happy to pick them up. So feel free to reach out to Matt or me on our Circle platform or via LinkedIn. We're more than happy to answer your queries and to professionally solve any issues that come up. So yes, if you're up against a wall, reach out to us and we'll be happy to not just build out your solution, but really build the future of this planet. Don't forget to ask yourself, will this matter at 2 degrees? And then we're here to help you make sure that matters when we are on the edge of that climate crisis.
And to help slow the speed at which we get there.
Yes.
We've got the expertise, the team, the talent, and I know really coming at it from the coaching side of things, how much and how challenging it can be to see the forest from the trees. Bringing in some of the incredible people we have on our team with Forward and now in our consulting arm as well has been so valuable for me, folks like Mehak, in terms of helping me see my own blind spots and taking things further faster. So if you need people like that, just forward.earth/consulting. It's right on our homepage. You can find it there. A little bit more information, see if it would be a good fit if you need someone to join your team and help you take this forward. And if you found this valuable, we'll be posting the recordings. You can access all of that, see who's attended, reach out to other folks in the space, and get active in the platform. Again, you're trying to find partners, clients, investors, co-founders. Share what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you need help with, how you can help others. Because if people know, they'll certainly reach out and ask. And if they don't know, you're just another kind of irrelevant nobody. Think of this like LinkedIn plus Meetup plus Tinder. Not LinkedIn, where you get the IT outreach from India of, do you need a new website developed? And you really don't want to reach out to people on LinkedIn and feel like a spammer. It's much more like a meetup. We're going there. I'm actually going to one later. And I'm going there and everyone else is going there because we want to meet other people. We want to connect. We want to network. We want to partner. We want to be able to do things together, make friends, etc. All of you are here for just that purpose around climate and sustainability. So be friendly, go reach out, chit chat with other folks. And if you do, just maybe it'll move both of your missions forward. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And now it's time to say peace, and we will see you next time. Check out the online events and share this with a friend if it was helpful.